In the grim darkness of the far future, long before the advent of mankind, the galaxy was the scene of a confrontation so grandiose that its echoes echo even into the 41st millennium. These events were called the War in Heaven, an ancient, almost mythical battle in Warhammer 40k lore, where powerful races and cosmic gods clashed in the Old Ones versus Necrons. Epic. In the beginning, there was a civilization called the Old Ones. According to legend, it was they who formed the foundation of the entire galaxy. Using unique psychic abilities and traveling through the warp via a network of interdimensional pathways, the future. Webway. The ancients lived incredibly long lives and possessed technology that even in the 31st millennium seems like a miracle. They're believed to have had a direct hand in the emergence of new races, including the Eldar. On the other side of the universe, the Necrontyr race was also evolving, a morbid race fading under the rays of its merciless sun. Their short, misery-filled lives had made the Necrontyr embittered against the world, their exceptional envy of the Old Ones. Longevity played a decisive role when fate brought these two great civilizations together in a military clash. While searching for a way to escape their impending doom, the Necrontyr entered into a fateful alliance with the Citan, powerful star entities. In exchange for an oath of service, the Citan gifted their new allies with the secret of gaining almost eternal life. Thus began the journey of transforming the Necrontyr into Necrons, their minds immersed in cold metallic shells of living metal. Soon, driven by anger and new power, they declared war on the ancients. Thus arose the War in Heaven, a conflict of colossal proportions involving not just warriors, but the Citan energy gods themselves. The catastrophic battles literally plowed through star systems, destroying a great variety of life forms. The Codex, Old Ones, once powerful lords of the galaxy, suffered terrible losses, but eventually the Citan faced betrayal as well. Having dealt with the ancients, the Necrons rebelled against their gods, shattering their essences into shards and turning them into weapons. The war ended with the Necrons, exhausted by centuries of confrontation, deciding to go into hibernation for millions of years, hiding in the depths of their tomb worlds, and waiting for the moment when the galaxy would be defenseless again. The ancients have all but disappeared, leaving behind only technological secrets, scraps of knowledge of the warp, and a legacy that other races, primarily the Eldar, have used in the future. Music. When the Necrons went into hibernation and the Old Ones disappeared almost without a trace, the galaxy found a relative calm. But it was the Eldar who were to take center stage in the New Age. According to legend, they were the children of the ancients and had mastered the vast holdings of the galaxy, utilizing their knowledge of the warp and the webway. A network of safe passages that allowed them to travel vast distances in an instant. The Eldar, with their powerful psyker abilities, took military science and art to unprecedented heights. They were driven by cultural and spiritual pride, bordering on arrogance. In this golden age, they easily defeated other races without encountering any equals. But the absence of serious threats led to decadence. Affluence begat carelessness, and many Eldar plunged into the pursuit of new pleasures, unaware that their collective passions were echoing in the warp. At first, the troubling symptoms went unnoticed. No one doubted the Eldar's unrivaled technology of anti-gravity and exotic materials, and the unquestioned hegemony established by the ancients' disappearance. Their vast star domains had no strict centralized governance, but unity was maintained by a common psychic foundation and pride in divine origin. It was their lack of limitations and colossal psyker abilities that would eventually play havoc with them, beginning the birth of a monstrous force in the darkness of the warp. As the Eldar star roads illuminated the galaxy with their bright, though doomed glow, life went on as usual on Earth, a distant and unremarkable world. Here, under the relentless sun and peaceful skies, a race was born that was destined to play a key role in the events of the 41st millennium. That race was mankind. In their deep antiquity, humans were nothing more than primates who gradually learned to use tools. Millennia passed. Epochs changed. Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic. The development was uneven. Bursts of culture, then backsliding into savagery. But one peculiarity even then distinguished mankind among other forms of life: curiosity and the urge to explore. The desire to explore the world around them, to conquer nature, and to look beyond the horizon, eventually led to the creation of the first civilizations. From the Sumerians and Egyptians to the great empires of antiquity and the Middle Ages. Many centuries later, technology and science began to develop particularly rapidly. Mechanization and electricity appeared, followed by much bolder ideas. Mankind ventured into space. First short flights to the nearest orbits, then to the moon. By about the third millennium, the foundations of future space power began to be laid on Earth and the newly formed colonies. People learned how to build ships for long-distance expeditions, search for suitable planets, and even laid the foundations for understanding the warp, the shadow dimension through which interstellar travel faster than the speed of light can be accomplished. However, as often happens in human history, bold dreams were followed by conflicts. Political and economic contradictions resulted in local and sometimes global wars. Gradually, several powerful nations engaged in large-scale colonization of space. On planets outside the solar system, people founded outposts and began to develop natural resources. Civilizations seemed to be making a great step forward, but within it, there were serious threats. Environmental crises, power struggles, and most importantly, unknown dangers lurking in the warp itself. The endless expanse of the galaxy holds more than just material monsters like orc hordes or reborn Necrons. Far more insidious is the realm of the immaterium, populated by entities that humanity has so far barely understood. But even in the early stages of space colonization, people encountered strange psychic phenomena, nightmare dreams, and ship systems failures when entering the warp. There was talk of demonic entities and cults erecting their own hidden idols. Most tended to think of it as superstition, the result of stress and the unpredictable nature of hyperspace. Nevertheless, even such dangers could not stop the human thirst for expansion. Over the millennia, humans spread across multiple systems, building entire metropolises on distant planets. Powerful corporations and governments sometimes fought over resources, spawning many conflicts that were the precursors to much larger wars. Yet, despite the feuds, colonizations took their course, forming the early human cosmos. In this era, there was not yet a single state to unite Terra and its colonies. Humanity existed in a variety of forms, from liberal republics to corporate oligarchies to totalitarian regimes. But overall, hovered the idea of progress and development, the belief in technology and science. People's energy, their persistence in exploring uncharted spaces, seemed inexhaustible. At the dawn of human civilization, when the first cities and kingdoms were just beginning to carve their names in stone history. Terra was secretly inhabited by one who was to become the greatest leader and symbol of humanity. Legends say that the Emperor Suktu appeared among us many thousands of years ago, carefully concealing his true nature and power. Some believe him to be the embodiment of hundreds of ancient shamans merged in one body. Others see him as a unique psyker born by the will of the earth itself. But whatever the real explanation, one thing is constant. This creature transcended the limits of ordinary human nature. The Emperor's life, according to legend, passed through shadows and secrets. He shunned glory and open rule, preferring to guide people gently and almost imperceptibly. He may have been behind the emergence of early philosophical teachings or the formation of progressive empires. He influenced the development of language, culture, and technology, guiding prophets, scholars, and rulers to the right ideas and advances. Thanks to his virtually immortal essence, the Emperor has seen civilizations crumble, religions and dynasties disappear, and still, mankind inexorably strives forward to a new era of knowledge and opportunity. While technological progress on Terra moved at a snail's pace, the Emperor looked closely at the weaknesses and strengths of humanity. He saw that humans remained susceptible to greed, vanity, and fear. But at the same time, he also saw the greatness of spirit, the thirst for knowledge and the capacity for selflessness. It was to protect these better qualities that he continued to live among us, preparing for the fact that sooner or later mankind would have to face far worse threats than earthly strife. Most people were unaware of the presence of the great patron, but the shadow of the Emperor was already spreading over many countries and cultures. His plans, however, went far beyond Earth alone. He was preparing to take mankind beyond the confines of his home planet, into the vastness of space where people would not only find new worlds, but also come face to face with the ruthless universal reality. To eventually lead this truly galactic campaign, the Emperor had to prepare himself and the entire human race for the inevitable trials. Thus ended the era of mysterious manipulations and observations, and the time was approaching when the Emperor would step out of the shadows and take the fate of mankind into his own hands. But first, the planet had to go through a phase of global change. From the first human spacewalks to technological leaps that would be both a blessing and a curse. It would be in these centuries that the conditions would be created for the Emperor to build the foundations of the future. Imperium, a great power that would stretch its iron threads across the galaxy. Music. After many millennia of being confined to the surface of their home planet, the time has come when mankind finally dared to look to the stars, not just with a dream, but with the real possibility of reaching them. By about the third millennium, a considerable time after the historical eras of the ancient world, the Middle Ages, and the modern age, Earth's technicians and scientists began to go beyond Earth orbit and explore the solar system. Technological advances over the centuries allowed the first permanent colonies to be built on the Moon, Mars, and a few other suitable planets. The search for new paths to the stars led people to experiment with a variety of methods of space travel. Sublight travel, which seemed at first the pinnacle of achievement, did not solve the main problem. To overcome the monstrous distances between the stars, where hours and days turn into long decades and centuries. But during this period, researchers stumbled upon an extremely dangerous but promising phenomenon. The warp, or as it is also called, the immaterium. Theorists suggested that in this parallel dimension, it is possible to shorten the duration of travel by skipping a ship through another space. At first, warp exploration was completely crude and risky. Expeditions that dared to test hypotheses often returned with distraught or missing crew members. Survivors spoke of nightmarish visions, heard voices appearing just inside their skulls, and equipment recorded anomalous bursts of energy. The lines between material reality and the psychic world in the warp are so thin that any emotion can take monstrous form there. And yet, despite all the risks, the human urge for expansion and sometimes selfless sacrifice overcame fear. Gradually, the initial principles of navigating through the warp were worked out. Humans created early versions of defense fields, experimental force barriers, and special systems that allowed ships to surface in normal space, more or less intact. The problem was that these jumps remained highly unstable. A slight disturbance in the immaterium was enough to disable an entire ship, and sometimes an entire fleet. There were rumors of cursed travelers, crews who returned from the warp possessed or insane. But as history shows, nothing stops mankind in its quest for the unknown. Step by step, technology improved. And so, in the centuries following the discovery of the warp's capabilities, colonization spread wider and faster. On distant planets, people began to build entire cities, cultivate the soil beneath greenhouses, and extract the valuable resources needed for further technological advancement. Some colonies declared independence, and new communities and cultures sprouted among the stars. It seemed that this was the breakthrough, that humanity would soon conquer hundreds or even thousands of worlds, moving from dreams to reality. However, this dawn had its dark side. Some outposts were hit by unnatural warp storms, communications were severed, and colonies disappeared without a trace. The rare surviving ships brought back eerie tales of demonic phenomena or paranoia gripping entire crews. Specialists began to suspect that the warp world was inhabited not by mere energy flows, but by something intelligent and extremely hostile, what humanity would later call the forces of chaos. But it was still too early to fully understand this threat. It is important to note that it was in those years that an extramural alliance between Earth and Mars was born. Technocults and inventors flourished on Mars, whose mechanisms became the cornerstone of cosmic progress. Thus, something like the future centerline of the Imperium's account was formed, the power and resources of Terra multiplied by the fanatical devotion to science of Mars. Although the Emperor's formal alliance with Mars would come later, it was during this period that humanity gained the foundation for future greatness and for future conflicts. Thus passed the era of space exploration and the first discoveries of the warp, an era of daring experiments, successes, and tragedies. Humans gained access to the colossal expanse of the universe, but at the same time opened the door to the nightmarish reality of the immaterium, where creatures roamed, feeding on the darkest emotions of sentient beings. At the turn of the 25th millennium, humanity was on the rise, continuing to colonize the stars and explore the warp. But at the same time, somewhere in the far reaches of the galaxy, a cataclysm was brewing that would affect the fate of millions of worlds. It was the tragedy of the Eldar, a race that had once seemed unshakable and almost divine. For centuries, the Eldar lived in luxury in a world where there were no limits to creativity, exploration of psychic powers, and the pursuit of pleasure. The technological and cultural power they had accumulated over the millennia made them virtually invulnerable to external enemies. Orcs or other Xenos were easily dismissed, and the threats of the warp were simply not thought of. At a time when humans were still learning how to build colonies in deep space, the Eldar had the Webway, a secure network of passages through the Immaterium. They could move easily between their magnificent colony worlds, and there was nothing to indicate impending collapse. But the problem lurked within the Eldar themselves. Their psychic potential was immense. Thought, emotion, and will could be translated into reality almost at the wave of a hand. It was this subtle connection to the warp that led to their fatal degradation. The more the Eldar immersed themselves in refined and in time perverted entertainment, the more the dark energy of their desires and passions accumulated in the darkness of the Immaterium. The collective psyche of the entire race became a gigantic crucible where the wildest fantasies and vile vices flared up. Soon, this informational storm of feelings resulted in the birth of a new chaos god. Slaanesh, the embodiment of sophisticated sensuality and vices. The culmination occurred so rapidly and apocalyptically that almost the entire civilization of the Eldar was swept away by one single psychic explosion. Multiple Eldar worlds were devastated in a matter of moments. Billions of Eldar died, their souls dragged into the warp where they were devoured by the newborn Slaaneshi. The Tuktino, Eye of Terror, a colossal warp rift that tore the fabric of reality and became a projection of Eldar vice onto the material world, was formed there at the point of the Great Breach. The origin of Slaanesh and the Eye of Terror had catastrophic consequences for humanity. Warp storms erupted across the galaxy, severing communication channels between planets. Colonies that once thrived on supplies of resources and technology from Terra became isolated for decades and centuries. Distant worlds were plunged into famine, disease, and internecine warfare. The entire vast network of human settlements, built up over centuries of space expansion, crumbled like a house of sand washed away by the tide. On Terra itself, events took such a grim turn that this period went down in history as the Age of Strife, also known as the Techno-Barbarian Age. The formerly unified system of government collapsed. Large clans and warrior alliances used the surviving wreckage of technology to assert their power. Entire baronies and empires emerged under despotic rulers. Some of them possessed nuclear weapons and even primitive versions of force weapons. But these achievements were developed and maintained by a handful of technopriests, jealously guarding their knowledge. Countries once able to fly to other planets together now fought fiercely over the pathetic remnants of high technology, fragments of spaceports, energy cores, or genetic laboratories. Scattered scientist enthusiasts risked their lives trying to preserve the documents of the former space age. But most of humanity slipped into savagery, fighting with spears and firearms in the ruins of ancient cities. The long night had come, a time when the prospect of a revival of galactic power seemed as fantastic as the fictions of the warp gods. Nevertheless, the fires of enlightenment were still burning in some places. On Mars, religious techno-cults had taken shape, striving to preserve and develop machine knowledge. Their machine god was the mysterious Omnissiah, later identified as the Emperor, though at that time, these were only the seeds of the future. Adeptus Mechanicus, and on Terra, darkness reigned for the most part. Brutal warlords called techno-barbarians led the various powers, waging endless wars over resources and sometimes even mysterious artifacts from the past. It was the same on the other surviving planets. Without supplies and mutual support, colonies collapsed and people degenerated from high technology to primitive cultures. Of course, periodically, there were alliances or confederations that attempted to revive past glories. But none of these projects stood the test of time and chaos. Warp storms still raged. Distortions roamed the cosmos, dragging with them demonic echoes. Ships that dared to go on long voyages went missing, and those that returned brought only horror stories of monsters that tore from the depths of the immaterium. Music. When the warp storms subsided and the age of techno-warfare reached its peak, the Emperor decided that the time had come to unite humanity and lead it into a new galactic age. He relied on an army of thunder warriors, the mighty prototypes of the future Astartes. These genetically and biotechnologically engineered fighters were incredibly strong and resilient, allowing the Emperor to consistently crush the dictators who held Terra in an iron fist. The Unification Wars were some of the most ruthless in history. The Emperor realized that as long as at least one powerful techno-barbarian remained alive, the threat of a new anarchy remained. Clan after clan were subjected to his will, and at the end of each battle, the Emperor offered the defeated warriors a choice: to join the future unified state or to fall with the tyrants. In parallel, he negotiated with Mars, whose fanatical devotion to the machine god and preserved resources made the planet an important ally. Subsequently, the united pact of Terra and Mars cemented the symbiosis between Earth's power and techno-prowess, becoming a solid foundation for the future. Imperium. With the major techno-barbarians fallen, it was time for the final unification of Terra. The formerly fragmented states swore an oath to the Emperor, who set about creating a new system of government and rebuilding the planet's industrial potential. A significant milestone was the proclamation of the Great Project, the formation of a powerful state to protect humans from external threats. It was called the Imperium of Man. Cities were renamed, monumental buildings were erected, and shipbuilding and weapons technologies laid the foundation for future galactic expansion. Rumors persisted about the tragic fate of the Thunder Warriors themselves. They allegedly suffered from genetic instability and were eliminated as soon as Terra submitted to the Emperor, so as not to pose a threat to the new era. Whatever the case, at the end of this bloody era, Earth was transformed from a field of strife into the stronghold of a young power, the Imperium, whose name would soon spread to thousands of planets. Now, the Emperor turned his eyes to the vast expanse of the galaxy, dreaming of reclaiming the scattered colonies and preparing for a battle with Xenos, pirates, and the dark forces lurking beyond the borders of civilization. When Terra was finally unified under the Emperor's Prutzau rule and the grand transformation had begun, the time had come for the next step, venturing out into galactic space to reunite the torn colonies of humanity and establish a unified order. To realize this truly titanic plan, the Emperor planned to create new, even more perfect, warriors and commanders who would become the vanguard of the coming campaign. Thus was born the greatest of his plans. 20 Primarchs. Each Primarch was supposed to embody certain ideals: bravery, wisdom, iron will, impeccable understanding of tactics and strategy. The future legions of Astartes, genetically enhanced soldiers for whom Primarch genes served as a kind of nucleus, were developed on their basis. However, barely had these great beings been created, the gods of chaos struck. The forces of the warp kidnapped the baby Primarchs and scattered them to various planets throughout the galaxy. This act was to undermine the Emperor's great mission, for he was left without his invincible sons. But the emperor was determined. First, he assembled the existing legions of Astartes, whose genetic basis was still intact under the control of laboratories on Terra and Mars. Then, he began the Great Crusade, gradually expanding the borders of the Imperium of Man while searching for his scattered sons across the stars. This crusade grew to include more and more worlds, becoming the grand event of the Etzah time, a galaxy-spanning triumph in Warhammer 40k lore that fans still rave about today. Each time the Emperor found one of the Primarchs, he became the leader of his legion, bonding with thousands of Astartes based on his genetic code. Imagine the hype: Horus with the Luna Wolves, Leman Russ howling with the Space Wolves, Fulgrim perfecting the Emperor's children. Pure fan-favorite moments that exploded the Imperium's power. In those years, the Emperor's forces waged countless campaigns across the galaxy. Human worlds, from the most technologically advanced to those severely degraded after the Age of Strife, or Long Night, met the Crusade in different ways. Some populations gratefully accepted the Imperium as liberators. Others had brutal rulers who had to be overthrown by force. These conflicts revealed the diversity of human cultures that had emerged in isolation: fanatical holdouts, techno-guild tyrants, religious cults straight out of your wildest 40k nightmares. But the Emperor believed humanity could not be strong while fragmented and at war with itself. And so, each world had a choice: join the Imperium or fall. In parallel, the forces of the Imperium faced colossal threats from Xenos, Orc Waz, early Tyranid shadows, pirate raiders, battles that became legendary, like the triumph at Ulanor, where Horus earned his shot at glory. With each victory, the Emperor's fame grew, fortune favored his quest, and gradually, he found more lost Primarchs. Some sons were idolized by their people, like angelic Sanguinius with the Blood Angels. Others feared as ruthless conquerors, like Angron and the World Eaters. But reunited, each became part of one project: the Great Crusade, whose goal was to unite humanity and prevent a repeat of the horrors of the Old Night. These were the golden years of the Imperium: technological leaps, endless victories, the echoes of greatness that meant everything to a humanity previously mired in strife. Fans loved this era for its epic scale. Think massive fleet battles, Primarch reunions, and that unbeatable momentum. The dark shadows during this triumph were almost invisible. Few suspected the rebellions and prophecies brewing in the depths of the warp, how the Chaos Gods longed to undermine the growing power of the Imperium. All that is known is that the Great Crusade marked a new stage in history, a unified, powerful human alliance led by a virtually divine leader and his semi-divine sons, the Primarchs. And this confidence in their invincibility brought humanity to the brink of the most important and tragic events that were already waiting ahead. Like the fan-favorite Horus Heresy betrayal that still breaks hearts today. As the Great Crusade approached its climax, the Emperor saw fit to step back from direct command and entrust all military operations to Primarch Horus Lupercal, the most illustrious and most loyal of his sons. Horus was proclaimed Warmaster, the supreme military leader of the Imperium. No one doubted his talents as a commander or charisma capable of rallying the legions. Yet beneath the outward confidence and glory were dangerous seeds of doubt. In some battles, like the shocking Interrex encounter, Horus faced mysterious forces corrupted by the warp. These encounters and their tragedies shook his faith in the Emperor's infallibility. Meanwhile, the Chaos Gods, entities dwelling in the Immaterium, skillfully fed these inner doubts, promising Horus unprecedented power and insight into the true nature of the universe. In the end, Even his phenomenal fortitude did not save him from gradual descent into the abyss of betrayal. Thus began the Horus Heresy, the greatest civil war in Imperium history, the ultimate fan heartbreak with brother versus brother showdowns. Under Horus and the Chaos God's influence, some Primarchs turned their backs on the Emperor, Angron embodying Khorne's fury with the World Eaters, Mortarion wallowing in Nurgle's plagues with the Death Guard, and Magnus the Red, the psychic powerhouse, trapped by Tzeentch's intrigue with the Thousand Sons. Such stories repeated galaxy-wide, yesterday's brothers on opposite sides of deadly conflict. An era of turmoil began for the Imperium. All resources from victorious expeditions turned against its own sons. Huge armies that fought Xenos and liberated worlds now fought each other, causing monstrous damage. Orcs and hostile civilizations, not facing concentrated repulse, activated on the Imperium's fringes. But the main battle was internal. Traitors established beachheads, conducted chaos rituals, amassed armadas assaulting fortified systems. With each battle, Imperial forces lost control of borderlands. Loyal Primarchs, Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius, Roboute Guilliman, desperately held back traitors, but time worked against them. A serious blow was lost trust from warlords and worlds who couldn't fathom how great Horus turned against his father. Instead of victorious march, the Imperium embroiled in self-destructive war. Supply routes interrupted, campaigns frozen, uncharted worlds plunged back into chaos without support. This civil war didn't slow expansion. It questioned united humanity's future. At last, the armada of treacherous legions, spurred by demonic forces and Horus's zeal, descended upon Terra. Their prize, the Imperial Palace, impregnable citadel, symbol of the Emperor's power. Defenders from loyal legions and armies held off onslaught, plasma volleys blazing, chaos sorcery hovering. No other fronts mattered. Humanity's fate decided here. At the siege of Terra climax, Horus's insane confidence peaked. He lowered his flagship's defenses to lure the Emperor into a duel, ending betrayal logically. The Emperor, realizing protracted fighting exhausted defenses, accepted, boarding Horus's ship. This decisive battle, one of Warhammer 40k's most legendary, clashed colossal wills. Father versus son, once close, now deadly enemies. Air split under blows, every moment saturated with warp energy and psyker power. The Emperor dealt the traitor a blow from which he could not recover. Horus perished, body and soul shattered in mangled warp veil, Chaos God's ultimate victory, hope dashed. That day was lost. But the Emperor, defeating greatest enemy, paid terrible price. His wounds fatal. Losing last strength, he returned to palace. Ordered placed on golden throne, unique device keeping life in body on death's verge. In past, throne planned for controlling webway, warding warp dangers. Now, Emperor's permanent dungeon. Eerie mechanisms sustained heartbeat, psyker activity, physical existence reduced to flicker. With Horus's death, Heresy's bloody march ended, but destruction monstrous. Remaining traitor legions retreated to Eye of Terror depths. Loyalists healed wounds, picking wreckage. Imperium space left leaderless. Emperor no longer physically managed, only mentally extending over people. Power passed to council. High Lords of Terra, supreme governing legislative body preserving Emperor's system. Even then, many realized Golden Age passed. Emperor's spirit hovered, keeping Astronomicon alive, giving hope. But realpolitik became bureaucratic mechanism. Space Marine legions reformed, never repeating betrayal scale. Not long ago, giant legions bastion of humanity's might, glory. Bloody events showed danger of massive power concentration in one leader. Realizing repeat catastrophe destroys Imperium, Primarch Roboute Guilliman, Ultramarines leader, embarked radical Astartes reform. Embodiment: Codex Astartes, detailed manual regulating troop numbers, structure, tactics, recruit rituals. Codex broke unwieldy legions into smaller, flexible chapters. Main idea: no commander absolute power over thousands. Each chapter rigid parameters. Key threshold: 1,000 combat brothers. Some given symbols on traditions, but all followed Codex spirit letter. For Astartes, division's serious challenge. Legions more than military, centuries-old cultures, veteran bonds, Great Crusade traditions. Many Space Marines left brothers for successor chapters. Some Primarchs, commanders, accepted grudgingly, but realized necessary saving Imperium from internal threats. Chapters from Reform. Second Founding. Inherited gene material, symbolism, rituals from parent legions, evolving independently. Traits, recruit worlds, missions. Some rigid charters, ceremonies, others closer to defended peoples. Traitor legions, unable full open campaign, retreated Eye of Terror, cradle chaos forces. Hid retribution, occasional daring raids. Immersed dark mystery demonic rituals, lost former ideals, sinking chaos gods' bondage. Imperium, constant lurking threat, never knowing next traitor's strike. Second founding key milestone Space Marines history. Laid structure existing eras. Hundreds independent chapters, operating single force, autonomously sectors. Despite doubts, sacrifices, decentralization strengthened stability. Single rebellion couldn't tear apart overnight. Guilliman, reforms author, reputation lawmaker, new Astartes order architect. Loyal warriors, shaken trust breakdown, found Codex foothold, just clear rules. Since, each chapter realized mission. Fight external enemies and preserve internal purity. Shadow rebellion darkening humanity's future, never again. As heresy smoke died, Emperor half-dead golden throne. New spiritual movement grew Imperium-wide. Emperor seen not just greatest ruler, savior, but true deity. Absence active power, direct statements. Emerging religious factions bolder proclaiming God Emperor. Universal worship cult born Terra palaces. Time, centralized, ecclesiarchy, declared emperor's divine tenets. Unquestioning devotion holy throne. Giant Gothic temples, cathedrals built, planets praying deliverance heresies, Xenos, threats. Decades, laid rituals, psalms, ceremonies, still practiced 41st millennium. Spread cult rapid fanaticism rise. Imperial propaganda. Every action thought subject God Emperor will. Cemented structures, armies, adeptus, administrative navies, woven ideological system. Secular officials realized religious loyalty trumped discipline. Essentially, cult, spiritual glue binding millions worlds. Parallel, Adeptus Mechanicus, guardians, priests, machine knowledge, saw Emperor Omnissiah Avatar, machine god. Sacralized technology, servitors, weapons, machinery, consecrated emperor auspices. Processes, purely technical, covered ceremonies, rituals. Adjustment, repair, furnished religious rite. Practice, system kept complex devices working. Only Mechanicus understood sacred relics. Masses considered miracles. Mid-35th millennium, imperial cult integral governance, inspired military exploits, ideological control pillar. Masses' minds, emperor no longer ruler, but living deity, presence, death's brink, guiding mankind destiny. Emperor rejected divine previous era, new reality dictated terms. Without sacred image throne, vast power might not survive eternal war harshness. 41st Millennium Turn, Chaos active, most notably Abaddon the Despoiler, sinister warlord inheriting Horus will cheating death power. Black Crusades shook Imperium frontiers, horrors, humanity stood. 13th Black Crusade, amid increased warp storms, catastrophic. Abaddon staked Cadia, Eye of Terror entrance. Cadia, long and vulnerable Imperium bastion. Fortifications, numerous Cadian shock troops, reliable chaos blockade. Centuries, Cadian gate lock, keeping Dark Legion's galactic space. Controlled Cadia, strategic passage Eye Terror sectors key. Abaddon, Black Legion, demonic allies descended Cadia. Imperial fleets rallied desperate defense. Fierce battles escalated multi-layered, space, orbit, neighboring systems, city ruins, Cadian fortifications, space marines, Astra Militarum regiments, Mechanicus Titans fought absolute hell. Warp distortions opened, hordes, cultists, daemons, treacherous space marines. Heroism defenders, Cadia fell, colossal morale blow. Immortal, Cadia stands, invalid. Loss, one world, open defenses gap, chaos, legions advance, unimpeded Imperium. Cadia falls, fateful, warp energy surged, material world unprecedented, demonic rituals, weakened defenses. Great rift formed, giant warp rift cutting galaxy half. Cicatrix maledictum, terrible universe wound, permanently divided Imperium two parts. 1. Imperium Sanctus, sacred Terra, Mars, bulk, Imperial systems. Surviving fleets, combat forces flocked, maintaining warp corridors control. Other, Imperium Nihilus, deprived Terra communication, plunged endless warp storms, darkness. Worlds cut center, survive constant chaos, pressure, growing Xenos aggression. Great Rift formation, demonic activity skyrocketed. Safe planets, immaterium portals opened. Monstrous entities burst, murder, corruption, thirst. Countless chaos cults, Imperial worlds momentum. Riots, ritual orgies driving sectors anarchy. Warp storms raged. Hyperspace travel riskier. Millions Imperium citizens. Apocalyptic fear time. Colossal state machinery. Fear, faith built. Couldn't protect worlds once. Localized campaigns. Catastrophes entire sectors. Fanatical God-Emperor devotion, desperate mobilization. Imperium not collapsed yet. New era born. Imperium Nihilus worlds, doomed isolation. Abaddon victories, celebrated Eye Terror. Great Rift, dramatic defeat reminder. Barrier dividing galaxy light, darkness. Darkness, chaos, allies confident. Preparing blows, putting humanity existence line. Indomitus crusade desperately needed. Dark period, rumors, worlds impending miracle, long fallen warrior. Guilliman, famed Ultramarines Primarch. Most dismissed empty hope. Guilliman motionless heresy, stasis mortal wounds. Team scientists, engineers, Archmagos Belisarius call, years researching regeneration. Call rarest technologies. Emperor pre-Great Crusade end. Activate powerful psycho-magical impulse, surpassing Imperium capabilities. Inari Spirit Bearer, Eldar God Death Inead, stepped. Dramatic events, gathering storm chronicles. Eldar, humans combined unique healing ritual. Primarch eyes opened, incredible regeneration rate. Shock, excitement swept associates. Days, recovered 10,000 years stasis, wore latest Mars armor, active life return, barely realized Imperium tragedy depth centuries. Bureaucratic machinery, dogmatic ecclesiarchy, enraged, quickly realized immediate action. Primarch reorganized defenses, proclaimed emergency measures saving Imperium Nihilus outlying worlds. Guilliman called Space Marines, Astra Militarum, fleet armadas, even Adeptus Mechanicus, new unity. Chaos threat too great. Old Strife reliance. Living Primarch emergence. Hope symbol billions. Finally, charismatic leader taking power reins, fighting omnipresent chaos. Guilliman soon realized deep-rooted problems, effort revitalizing stagnant, overgrown system. Return undeniable proof, Primarchs great past personality legends realizable bleak 4032. Millennium, war-consuming light spark. Guilliman return turning point entire Imperium. Realizing great rift brought catastrophe brink. Risen Primarch proclaimed unprecedented determination. Indomitus Crusade, grand military political campaign, reorganizing defenses, saving crumbling state. Belisarius Call, surprised Guilliman resurrection, unveiled engineering marvel. Primaris Space Marines new generation. Improved gene seed, modern equipment, make Imperial chapters losses, serving front lines 1,000 years, thinned endless war centuries. Indomitus Crusade announced. Main Imperial forces rushed rebuild lost ties, reclaim chaos fallen Terra power worlds. Desolation fear reigned, prospered planets devastation, orc invasions warboss led, sectors total carnage destruction zones. Greenskins seen, anarchy ensued, orcs no long negotiations, blue path, Imperium transferred colossal reserves, remote scattered regions. Not only problem. Space depths, Tyranids active, adept devouring biomass entire systems. Warp storm isolated colonies, no quick help, attack. Ominous reports Necrons awakening, ancient race hibernation, emerged tomb armies. Necrons rumored ruled mysterious silent king, restoring Iron Legion's majesty, striking fear sophisticated Adeptus Astartes. Chaos legions spreading wings, defenses cracks, reaching Imperium Nihilus worlds near Terra cut. Mutinies, cults, rebellion flourished. Authorities' hands insufficient order restore. Guilliman, coherent command chain absent, crusade collapse, employed Primaris maximum, stabilizing desperate fronts simultaneously. Imperium vast, clumsy bureaucracy mired. Primarch plans, conservative factions resistance. Odds despite, Guilliman will, God Emperor faith inspired trillions, existence doomed thought. Legendary Primarch, depths past emerged, Mars Mechanicum craftsman support, new weapons, machinery production lines. Primaris effectiveness proved, genetic stability enhanced characteristics battlefield storms, turning seemingly lost battles tide. Indomitus Crusade never easy victory march, protracted countless frontiers confrontation, monstrous orc hordes, abominable Tyranid hive fleets, Necron metal afterlife, invisible chaos, shadows heart Imperium seeking, campaign system held. Soldiers, civilians burned hope. Guilliman acting force arms, deep reform, revitalizing dead bureaucracies, restoring humanity faith future, era absolute peril hour, courage hour, immortal emperor spirit, reborn sun, raised people unprecedented dark galaxy threats. See?